Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. I was going to do a negative video today. It was going to be a list video, like 3 things people do wrong when processing their images in Lightroom. But I'm feeling pretty positive today and I don't want to do a negative video, so I'm going to do a positive video. In this video, I'm going to talk about the one thing people should do more of in Lightroom. All right, that one thing people should be doing more of in Lightroom is use the local adjustment tools. Too many people, me included, rely too much on the global adjustment tools. And there are times when your image will be better if you do some of those global adjustments locally. For example, I have this image here and I did some global adjustments already. I went to the Basic tab and I did highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks, and I did saturation. Now at this point, I would probably start to do something with texture, clarity, sharpness, and so on. But most often, those adjustments are better done locally. Why? Well, if you have an image that is uniformly sharp everywhere, that won't usually be as appealing to the person looking at it because there's nowhere for their eyes to rest. Usually, you would like the most important thing in the image to be sharp, but then other areas of the image don't need to be as sharp. So someone could look at the image, notice the most important thing, enjoy how sharp it is, but then have a place for their eyes to rest. If it's uniformly sharp everywhere, it won't be as appealing because there's nowhere for their eyes to rest. This is where the local adjustment tools really will shine. Now, in the case of this image, we have the gorilla, and really all that needs to be sharp is the gorilla's face. So you can make the argument maybe the gorilla's hand as well, maybe that leaf that's near the gorilla's mouth, but other than that, nowhere else needs to be pin sharp. So local adjustment tools will work better. Now, carrying on with this image, I did do some more local adjustments to it. I did lens corrections. And in the Detail tab, I did color noise reduction. Why? Well, that isn't available locally in a local adjustment tool, so I had to do it globally. But you'll see luminance noise reduction is at 0 and sharpening are at 0. Again, noise reduction as well. If we zoom in on the gorilla, you'll see that to the side here, this like homogeneous colored background, there's a lot of noise there. This was shot at a very high ISO. I'll have all the gear and settings in the description below this video. But you can see like the gorilla's skin, there's a lot of detail there, and there really isn't as much noise there. So if I go and adjust noise globally, noise reduction globally, to remove it over here, I soften the gorilla's skin a little bit too much. So this again is something that's better done locally. And let's start there. Let's remove the noise that's in the background. So I'm going to get the brush tool. And most often when you're doing local adjustments, you're going to use the local adjustment tools, the brush, the radial filter, and the graduated filter, although that one probably not quite as much. Now I have the brush open. I'm going to reset it by double clicking on the word effect. That resets all the sliders. And we're going to go to that noise slider. Now this is a bit of a confusing slider because it says noise. And that kind of implies that if you move this slider up to 100, you're going to add noise to the image. In reality, what you're doing is you're reducing noise. So this should be called noise reduction. And we're moving that to 100. You'll get kind of a big brush. Now, if I was doing this in real life, not in a video, I'd use a smaller brush and be a little more careful around the gorilla. But in this case, I have this large brush. I have feathering at 100, flow and density at 100, and auto mask off. I just want to eliminate the noise in that background as best as possible. And again, I'm just going to go very quickly for this video and not be very careful around the gorilla itself, or herself, I should say. Now, we'll zoom in. If you have a tool open and you want to zoom in, hold the space bar in. When you hold the space bar in, you'll turn into the magnifier tool, and then you could click and zoom in. So you can see that, get in a little better, that I reduce noise. Here's a before after. There's before, see a lot of noise there, and then after. Hopefully that came through in the video. Now, if that isn't good enough, you could of course add another brush stroke if you'd like, or a quicker way is you could just right click on the little button. All right, right click on that button and a little menu pops up. See that duplicate? Go to duplicate. So we're now adding twice the noise reduction to this area. We'll zoom in. And there's before and there's after. Now, of course, I did a really lousy job painting it on, but you get the idea. You go a lot more carefully, maybe around the grill, use a smaller brush and get in a little bit better around the edges and so on. So we reduce noise very easily with the brush locally. Now I want to sharpen the gorilla's face because, as I mentioned at the top, that's the most important part. We want people to notice her face and we want her face to be sharp. So I'm going to get a new brush. I'm going to click on New. We're going to reset the sliders, or that slider, by double clicking on the word Effect. And then, you know, for sharpening, of course, we have the sharpness slider. We'll push that up, but also clarity and texture affect that as well. All right, so we're going to move those up. And we're just going to paint this adjustment on her face, maybe from the brow line down to her chin and mouth area. And I'm going to get her hand too. I think her hand's important in the shot, and maybe the leaves there that are near her mouth as well. Now, looks pretty good, right? Let's go before the brushes and after the brush. So I like it. So far, so good. Now it's very sharp right here. So someone will look at this and notice her face right away. And then when their eyes need a little rest, they could look away. And they're not being fatigued by looking at something sharp uniformly everywhere. Now, with that said, I probably exacerbated any noise that is on her face with those adjustments that I just did. I could come back in and tone those down. Let's zoom in though and look. I'm going to hold the space bar in. And there is a considerable amount of noise. So I'm going to get a new brush. And we're going to double click on the word Effect to reset the sliders. We're going to turn noise reduction up. And then we'll come in here and I'll brush it around her eyes specifically. That's where most of the noise is. And I'm kind of defeating the purpose a little bit now. I'm kind of softening it in there. But, you know, photography is always about trade-offs, right? I mean, even in camera, sometimes you sacrifice ISO for aperture or vice versa, or for shutter speed or whatever. And same thing here in post-processing. Sometimes we're going to sacrifice a little sharpening for noise reduction. And you can see it's softened it nicely there. I could even turn it up higher if I want or need to. But it's still sharp, like on her folds of her skin of her face and everything. And there isn't a lot of noise there. Nothing to be concerned about, in my opinion. We zoom back out. Now, for this brush local adjustment, I just did sharpening and noise reduction, right? Well, clarity, and if you count clarity and texture as sharpening. I did sharpening and noise reduction. But don't limit yourself. If you have an image that is hazy in the background, you could dehaze it just for the background and not affect anywhere else. If you want to affect shadows or whites or blacks, any of these adjustments, any of these sliders, you could do it locally. And sometimes, and many times, it'll be better to do it locally instead of globally. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. Now, again, in this example, I just did sharpening and noise reduction, but there's so much more you could do. Now, let's just talk about the radial filter very quickly, because that you could use for local adjustments too, and most often it's for vignetting. I like to add a vignette. Those of you who watch my videos know that I do. And when you go to the Effects tab, of course, it just puts it uniformly around the edges. This is a more dynamic photo than that. The gorilla's offset. She isn't like smack dab in the middle. And there's other things in the image too. There's the tree and the leaves. I may not want it equally dark on the right and the left. I may want it off a little bit. I may want it lower. I don't know. Let's experiment with the radial filter. So I'm going to open up the radial filter and I'm going to reset it by double clicking on the word Effect, and I'm going to take exposure down. I'm not going to invert it because I want it to affect the outside. And I'm just going to quickly draw it over our gorilla like that. Now, when you're in the fit view, this is called the fit view, sometimes the radial filter, you'll have these handles off the image. So to better affect those handles, go over to the left-hand panel And at the very top, go to something like 1 to 8. So that will really shrink everything down. And then you could move this around and you could draw out the handles the way you want. Now you'll notice if you grab one handle, the opposite handle draws out or in equally. If you want to just move one handle all by itself without affecting the other three, hold in the Alt or Option key. It's Alt if you have PC, Option if you have a Mac. And when you do that, you could just like sneak one in without pushing the other side in. Now in this case, like the back of the Gorilla to me isn't very interesting, right? All the action's from the face out. So I want less vignette on the right, more vignette on the left. So that's why I'm using this radial filter to darken it more over here and less over here. And maybe we could bring it in just a little, maybe down just a little bit. Now once I'm happy with it, I'll go back to that left panel and go back to fit. All right, now let's do a before after. I think it's a little too dark, but let's do before after. There's before and there's after. Definitely is a little too dark, so we're going to take exposure up and maybe feathering down a little bit. That will make it not so much into the middle of the Gorilla. Let's do before after there. Before and after. I think it still needs to go more to the right, so we're going to push the whole thing to the right that way. So I could fine tune it. That's the whole point here. I really have the opportunity now to place this vignette exactly how I want it on the image, and every image is going to be different. So, and again, it's not just for vignetting. You may have a situation where you may want to invert the vignette and just affect the shadows over the Gorilla or something like that. And so you're going to put a vignette over the Gorilla and do that. Or maybe you want to sharpen something and the vignette fits perfectly on the object you want to sharpen. Whatever. So the vignette is another local adjustment tool that I'd like to see photographers do more of. And trust me, top fine art photographers spend a lot of time doing local adjustments to their image. If not in Lightroom, they're doing it in Photoshop, but they're doing local adjustments. They're not adjusting things globally as much as they are locally. A fine art photographer would probably spend a lot of time on the eyes of the Gorilla, then use different brushes and adjustments for the skin folds on the cheeks and nose, then different brushes and adjustments for the mouth and lips, and different for the hands. So you get the idea. They spend a lot of time like really kind of adjusting it very locally to the various parts of the image. And I want to encourage everyone to do that. I want to see photographers use more local adjustments in their images and really think ahead of how someone is going to look at your image and where you want them to look and where you want them to rest their eyes. That way, you'll better apply local adjustments to your shot. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.